Forget everything you think you know about New Year's, that moment when you raise a glass at midnight on December 31st. For centuries, none of that existed. January was just another month buried in the middle of winter. The year kicked off in March. Picture this. You wake up on a March morning in the year 70 before Christ. The streets of Rome are buzzing with vendors shouting out prices for olive oil and wheat. Musicians pluck their lyres on dusty street corners. The smell of fresh-baked bread mingles with the sharp odor of horses and human sweat. But something is different. Everyone is celebrating, because today, at this very moment, the new year is beginning. For centuries, the Romans had been following a chaotic calendar, one created by Romulus, the mythical founder of Rome, that had only 10 months and 304 days. The rest of the year simply didn't exist. There was a blank stretch of time between December and March, a black hole where nobody bothered to count the days. But the problem ran even deeper than that. The Roman priests, known as pontiffs, held total control over the calendar. They controlled time itself, and with that power they did whatever they pleased. They tacked on extra days whenever they felt like it. They stretched months to benefit their political allies and cut years short to hurt their enemies. Time had become a bargaining chip, a tool of political manipulation. Try to imagine planning a harvest when the calendar shifts every single year. You plant wheat in March, but then the priests decide to tack on 22 extra days to the month before. Your harvest falls behind. Your grain rots in the field. Merchants were losing fortunes because contracts expired on dates that never actually arrived. Soldiers marched off to battles scheduled for months that didn't yet exist. Rome was drowning in temporal chaos. The calendar was running 45 days ahead of the actual seasons. When the calendar said it was spring, winter's cold still gripped the air. When it marked summer, the leaves were already beginning to fall. Nature and human time were living in separate worlds, parallel, disconnected, completely out of sync. Then Julius Caesar rose to power, not as a king, because Rome despised kings, but as dictator perpetuo, a title that sounded temporary but was anything but. Caesar was a general, a politician, a conqueror. He had crushed Gaul, crossed the Rubicon, and stood down the Senate. But his greatest enemy wasn't waiting on any battlefield. It was hiding in the calendar. Caesar looked at the chaos around him. He saw merchants arguing over dates, farmers hopelessly lost between the seasons, soldiers uncertain about when their campaigns were even supposed to begin. The most powerful empire in the world couldn't even count its own days correctly, and that infuriated him. Because an empire that can't control time controls nothing. The problem was, Caesar wasn't an astronomer. He had no grasp of lunar cycles or the movements of the sun, but he knew someone who did. Sosigenes of Alexandria, an Egyptian mathematician and one of the greatest astronomers of the ancient world. Caesar summoned him, and together they set out to redesign time itself. Sosigenes arrived in Rome carrying ancient papyrus scrolls, precise calculations on the rotation of the Earth, and centuries' worth of accumulated Egyptian astronomical knowledge. And he brought a radical proposal: abandon the lunar calendar entirely. Adopt a solar calendar, a year of 365 days, with one extra day added every 4 years. Caesar listened carefully, his eyes fixed on the celestial maps drawn on yellowed parchment, his hands tracing the invisible orbits that governed the seasons. And then he made his decision. In the year 46 before Christ, he would decree the final year of the old calendar, a year that would stretch to 445 days. 445 days. Let that sink in. The longest year in all of human history. Caesar added 90 extra days to bring the calendar back in line with the seasons, 2 entire months inserted between November and December. He called it the Year of Confusion, a necessary mess, created to establish eternal order. Imagine living through that year. You're in November, and then out of nowhere, 2 brand new months appear. They called them Undecember and Duodecember, ghost months, days that existed only to correct the mistakes of the past. The Romans lived through 67 extra days, waiting and counting, while Caesar reorganized the universe. But the biggest change was still ahead. Caesar didn't just fix the calendar, he completely rebuilt it. He took Romulus's original 10 months and added 2 brand new ones at the start of the year. January, named after Janus, the two-faced god who gazes both at the past and at the future. And February, the month of purification. But here's the cruel paradox. Caesar moved the start of the year from March to January, yet the names of the months stayed exactly the same. September, which means 7th month, became the 9th. October, the 8th month, became the 10th. November and December, which had been the 9th and 10th months, became the 11th and 12th. The names were shouting a truth that no longer existed. Caesar restructured everything. He spread 365 days across 12 months. January and March were given 31 days each. April, June, September, and November got 30. And February, the shortest month, received 28 days, with 1 extra day added every 4 years. The leap year, a word that traces back to the Latin bisextus, the doubled 6th day. On the first day of January in the year 45 before Christ, Rome woke up to a new world. The Julian calendar was in effect. The pontiffs had lost their grip on time. They could no longer manipulate the months or add days on a whim. Time was now fixed, mathematical, and predictable. The irony, though, was devastating. Caesar had built a calendar that would outlast empires, a system so efficient that, with minor adjustments, we still rely on it today. But he himself wouldn't live to see its first anniversary. Less than 2 years later, on the Ides of March, 15 senators closed in on him at the theater of Pompey, and 23 blades tore through his body. Caesar fell at the feet of Pompey's statue, the very rival he had defeated in the civil war. His blood stained the white marble. 23 wounds, 1 for each treacherous senator. The man who reorganized time died without any time left to enjoy it. He built a calendar that would outlive empires, survive the fall of Rome, and govern nations he never could have imagined. And yet he himself was erased, murdered, destroyed by the very senators who had sworn to protect Rome. But Caesar's revenge came through time itself. Mark Antony, his loyal ally, renamed the month of Quintilis to Julius in his honor, July, the month of Caesar's birth. And decades later, when Augustus became the first emperor of Rome, he too wanted his mark on the calendar. He renamed Sextilis to Augustus, August, and even stole a day from February so that his month would also have 31 days. Because his month couldn't be shorter than Caesar's. The Julian calendar dominated the world for 1,600 years, but it carried a small flaw, a tiny, almost invisible error. Every Julian year had 365 and a quarter days, but the actual solar year is 365 days, 5 hours, 48 minutes, and 46 seconds, a difference of just 11 minutes and 14 seconds. 11 minutes. Sounds like nothing, but every 128 years, that gap added up to a full extra day. By the 16th century, the calendar had drifted 10 days ahead of reality. Easter, which was supposed to be calculated based on the spring equinox, had fallen completely out of alignment. The Catholic Church panicked. That's when Pope Gregory XIII stepped in. In 1582, he issued a decree and simply erased 10 days from the calendar. People went to bed on October 4th and woke up on October 15th. 10 days ceased to exist. He also introduced a new rule for leap years. Years divisible by 100 would not be leap years, unless they were also divisible by 400. The Gregorian calendar was born, the one you use today every time you check the date on your phone, schedule an appointment, or count down the days to the new year. You are using a refined version of Julius Caesar's invention, 2,070 years later. Here's the final paradox. Caesar was assassinated because senators feared he was becoming a king. They feared his absolute power, but his real power was never in his legions or his swords. It was in the calendar. Because while empires crumbled and dynasties vanished, Caesar's time kept on ticking, marking, and governing. You celebrate New Year's in January because of a dictator who died more than 2,000 years ago. You count the months in the order you do because Caesar decided to reorganize time. You live inside a calendar that carries the name of a man who was killed for his thirst for power. And every time you glance at the date, you're looking at Julius Caesar's final legacy, immortalized not in marble statues, but in the very structure of time itself. If you're enjoying these paradoxes from the past that nobody ever tells you about, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, because every single week I bring you more stories about how small decisions changed everything, about how the past built the present in ways you never could have imagined, and about how the people who shaped the world weren't always heroes. Sometimes they were dictators, sometimes they were visionaries, sometimes they were both. See you in the next one.